Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep into Ken Liu's The Paper Menagerie. It's a story that I think a lot of people have probably read, and it's really moving. But today we're not going to just rehash the plot or anything.
Right.
We're going to use a semiotic approach to kind of unpack the layers of meaning hidden in the story.
Yeah, semiotics. That's the study of symbols and signs, right? So we're going to be looking at how seemingly simple things like, I don't know, like a paper tiger can actually represent really complex ideas and emotions.
Exactly. And the Paper Menagerie is packed with this kind of symbolism. Like you said, there are these paper animals, but there's so much more than just origami. They represent, well, all sorts of things. Love, culture, loss, even the fragility of relationships.
Yeah, all those things come into play. And the story focuses on Jack, who is biracial. He's grappling with his Chinese heritage. And those origami animals that his mother makes, they become this really powerful symbol of that struggle.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in. The story starts with that incredible origami tiger, the Laohu. We meet it pretty early on when Jack is just a little kid and he's completely inconsolable. Like nothing can calm him down. And then his mom folds him this special tiger.
And it's not just any tiger, right? I mean, it's a Laohu, which has a ton of significance in Chinese culture.
Yeah.
It represents strength, protection, even a kind of like magical power.
Yeah.
So from the get-go, that Laohu is set up as a super potent symbol.
Oh, yeah. And what really gets me is how the story describes his mother breathing life into it.
Uh-huh.
It's not just paper moving around. She's actually, infusing it with her essence.
Right.
Almost like a piece of her soul is woven into those folds.
I mean, it is like she's giving him a part of herself, right?
Yeah.
Which is huge because she doesn't speak English that well, so those origami animals become her way of communicating her love, her connection to her son.
It's almost like her own special language.
Exactly, a language of love and connection.
It makes you think about all those little things we have, objects that might seem ordinary to other people, but to us, they hold so much meaning.
Totally. It's all about the personal connection, right? I mean, think about the difference between just some random stuffed animal and one that, like, your parent made for you. It could be like the same thing, but the meaning we give it, the stories we build around it, that's what makes it special.
And speaking of meaning and stories, the choice of origami itself is really important here. I mean, origami is so deeply tied to Asian traditions and culture. It's like an art form that's been passed down through generations, carrying all these stories and history in its folds.
For sure. It's definitely not just a craft. It's a tangible connection to heritage. So when Jack starts to reject his Chinese heritage, he's embarrassed by his mom's accent, finds her traditions weird. It's like he's pushing away this beautiful, intricate part of himself.
Yeah, and those origami animals, they become these powerful reminders of that struggle. There's this real tension there, right? He wants to fit in, be normal, but in doing so, he's rejecting the very thing that makes him unique, his cultural background.
Exactly. And that tension, it kind of gets amplified by the fact that paper itself is so fragile. I mean, think about it. It rips, it crumples, it's so easy to just like throw away.
Yeah.
It's almost like a metaphor for how delicate Jack's relationship with his mother is.
It really does feel like the origami is mirroring that push and pull,
Yeah.
The sense that there's this precious bond, but it could be broken so easily.
Yeah, exactly. And that fragility, and that's actually something we're going to dig into more as we move forward. How does that symbolic language, like the paper and the folding, how does that play into Jack's journey? And what happens when those fragile connections are strained to a breaking point?
We were just talking about how fragile paper is, and I can't help but think back to that scene where Jack's mother is dying.
Yeah.
And she asks him to take out that box of origami animals on Qingming.
Right. And that detail, the timing, it's super important. I mean, Qingming, it's a big deal in Chinese culture. It's a day where families remember their ancestors, They visit graves and pay respects. It's a time to honor those who have passed.
So when she asks Jack to take out those origami animals on that specific day, it's almost like she's saying, hey, these creations, they're tied to my memory.
Yeah, like they become these physical representations of her even after she's gone.
Exactly. And you mentioned earlier how his mom used to write letters on paper cranes, sending them off like messages to her dead parents.
Yeah, she did.
It makes you think about all the origami as this bridge between the living and the dead, a way to connect across time and space.
That's a really good point. Like, it's as if the act of folding, of breathing life into these paper creations, it's like you're transcending the limitations of the physical world. And for Jack, who spent so much time pushing away his Chinese heritage, It's a powerful message, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
And, it makes you wonder if his mother understood his struggle, like his wanting to fit in, and she was trying to show him that his heritage wasn't something to be ashamed of, but something to be treasured.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. And it brings us to the sad irony of the story. Jack rejects the very thing that makes him special. That connection to his mother and his heritage. He spends so much time trying to erase those creases, those folds that represent his culture, that he misses their beauty. He
I know.
misses their strength.
It's more than just rejecting it. He tries to hide it. Like when he refuses to speak Chinese with his mother, or he says they have nothing in common, it's like he's taking her love, her culture, and shoving it all away in the attic.
But even when he puts them away, they're still there. They aren't destroyed. It's like an accidental act of preservation, waiting to be rediscovered.
Like a seed buried in the ground, waiting for the right time to sprout. But in the meantime, that paper, it's a constant reminder of his mother's love. Always there. Sadly, he doesn't fully appreciate it until she's gone.
Right, and that realization, it's what leads him to that amazing moment where he finally embraces his heritage. That's the scene where he learns to write the Chinese character for love.
Ay.
Yeah, I. And he
Yeah.
writes it on the Lahu.
That part always gets me. It's like he's finally claiming that part of himself he tried so hard to deny. And he's not just reclaiming his heritage, he's reconnecting with his mother, with everything she was.
It's interesting, isn't it? He chooses writing as his way back to her. It's like, remember how she used to write those letters on the origami?
Yeah.
It's like he's closing the loop, bridging that gap between them with the very thing that once separated them.
He's not just bridging the gap, he's continuing the tradition. He's taking those little pieces of his heritage, those bits of paper, and folding them into something new that reflects who he is.
Absolutely. Those paper animals, they were brought to life by his mother's breath, and now he's bringing them back with his own breath, his own understanding. It's a beautiful illustration of how life works in cycles, how we carry those who came before us with us.
He's taking those pieces of his past, those little pieces of his mom and her culture, and he's making them a part of his life now, creating this beautiful new thing.
It's what makes the Paper Menagerie so powerful, don't you think?
Yeah.
It reminds us that even the most ordinary things can have so much meaning. Just like those paper animals, our everyday lives are full of these hidden stories, these cultural ties, these deep emotions that we might not even notice.
Yeah, it's so easy to just get caught up in the day-to-day and forget to look deeper. Forget to appreciate the things that connect us to something bigger.
Think about the things you have, like family heirlooms, or recipes that have been passed down, or even just like rituals and traditions.
Yeah.
Those things might seem pretty basic on the surface, but they're actually loaded with meaning and history.
It's like that saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure. We have to learn to look beyond the surface and see the stories behind this stuff in our lives. What might seem like nothing to one person could mean the world to someone else.
And it's not just about appreciating the past, it's also about understanding how those stories shape us today. Our culture, our relationships, those little things can be like bridges, helping us figure out who we are and where we came from.
So as we finish up this deep dive into the paper menagerie, I think what we're left with is this idea that we all have our own paper menageries, just waiting to be discovered, waiting to be understood. Maybe that's that old teddy bear you had as a kid, or a photo of your grandparents, or even something as simple as a recipe card in your grandma's handwriting.
Those are the things that tell our stories, the things that hold our memories, and they connect us to something bigger.
Right, and those connections, those stories, they're not just about the past.
Yeah.
They're about who we are right now, who we're becoming, and how we choose to carry those legacies with us. So take a minute to look around, really listen, and you'll see all those hidden meanings that are all around you. What are the paper menageries in your life, and what stories do they tell?